I've often heard the Mass described as the perfect prayer. That's a statement that for me at least is hard to believe. And I'm a practicing Catholic who works at a church as a youth minister. So if I have trouble with that, I can imagine you do too. I know that when I think about the Mass and being perfect, I often think of, what if there's bad music? Because let's face it, we've all been to Masses where the music was not ideal. At the same time, some of you also may say, well, the homilies can be a bit hard to understand. They can be a bit long, they can be boring, they can be dry. And so if those are two big major flaws that are part of the Mass, how could it ever be the perfect prayer? See, the prayer of the Mass is exactly that, a prayer. Something that we participate in, something that we proclaim, something that we use to glorify God. It's not the people that make it perfect, but it's the prayer that makes it perfect. Like when I think about praying the Our Father or the Rosary, if my voice cracks in the middle of praying an Our Father, does that make the prayer bad? Does that make the prayer any less worthy of praying? Absolutely not. You just would laugh at me for being a bad conveyor of that, and the prayer would remain sacred, remain holy. That is how we look at the Mass. Because the Mass, as I was saying, is perfect. If the Mass is perfect, and we recognize that there's many problems with it that can happen when there's bad speakers or bad musicians, which there is. I'm not trying to excuse that with the Mass. I'm just trying to help you understand and help myself understand that there's more to the Mass than just the surface parts. Like I said, a bad person praying does not make the prayer bad. What it does is it just reminds us that it needs to be done to the best of our ability. Because that's the thing. If the Mass is not perfect, why should we go? Now, the crazy thing that I often think about is that people all over the world go to Mass. I've often heard that the church is in secret because, believe it or not, the church in China and many other countries is outlawed. It is illegal in many places still to be Christian. That sounds preposterous to us because we go, well, there's a lot of churches here, especially in Yorba Linda on this one street alone, Yorba Linda Boulevard. There's like 9 churches that are all within like 2 miles of each other. So it's kind of hard for us to wrap our minds around the church not being out, not being allowed, it being illegal to go to church. And so when we think about that, we go, they probably don't go to Mass, huh? Because if they could get arrested, in some places if you could get killed, yeah, you probably would go. Because when I have soccer games, I don't go to Mass. If I could sleep in, I don't go to Mass. Because the honest to God truth is that many of us will pick a better sleep than going to Mass. Because we go, oh, I'd rather sleep in than go hear a terrible homily or hear bad music or whatever. Yet, everything I just told you about people in these countries, they go and they get killed and they get arrested for going to Mass. What are we missing when it comes to the Mass? Because if people are seeing these things and they're being motivated in this way, is their churches different? Are they saying different things? No, the Mass has the same readings everywhere that you go, the same prayers, the same format. It is the same prayer anywhere in the world. And yet here we are in the country where we have everything. We have anything that we want to watch available on our phone, on a TV, on our laptops, tablets, anything. We could go anywhere. Here in Southern California, there are so many places we could spend our time. Why go to Mass? Why go to church when you can go to Disneyland, when you can go to Universal, when you can go to the Block of Orange, when you can go to the beach? Orange County has so many things to do instead of the Mass. So we look at all of those things and we go, those are more important. Now, if we'd rather do those things and people are getting killed, where's the disparity? I think a lot of it goes to how we look at Mass. If we go to Mass and look at it as something to get inspired by, we're looking at it wrong. If we look at the Mass as something to go because we want to hang out with friends, we're looking at it wrong. If we go, I want to go to Mass because I want some breakfast burritos, that is wrong. It's not about the music either. And that's something that I need to remind myself of. When I was in high school, the church I went to had a youth Mass, and everybody would stand in the back of the church. Okay, Mass would be happening, and there'd be about 15 to 20 people in the back of the church, all in high school, just standing with each other. You're standing in the back of the church, right? With your friends, with your people, and you go, that's a good thing. We're here, we're hanging out, we're at Mass. But even then, that is not the priority. I'm looking about who I'm with rather than if I'm participating. See, we've trained our brain to treat Mass like we do when we watch sports. We watch a football game, we watch a basketball game, we watch a baseball game, and we watch. Because think about it, when you're little and you come into Mass and you're noisy, what's the first thing you're told? Shh, be quiet. Just sit there and listen, okay? Just sit there, listen, watch, right? That's what we're told. And as we grow up, our attitude doesn't change. We're just quiet and we watch. I know that when we're told that, the intention is good because we want it to be a place that's respectful. We want to be a place full of reverence. But at the same time, when we're told so long to be quiet, then eventually, we never really do anything. We don't talk, we don't respond, we don't sing, and we don't pray. These are the things that prevent us from the Mass, from participating. But even then, there was a story that I was told that drastically has changed my view of the Mass. As a youth minister, you would not even guess how many times I've heard, Mass is too boring. I went to Steubenville and I went to retreat and Mass was so good, and it's just not like that here. The thing is, again, Jesus himself was Jewish, and so the Mass that we participated in was very similar to how Passover was structured that Jesus would attend, right? And like at Passover, there was so much weight and significance behind it. You would never hear Jesus show up and go, oh, like Passover was so lame compared to last year, you know? Because here's what happened at Passover. There was this thing called the Passover sacrifice, and what would happen was an offering was made to God, an unblemished, innocent lamb. And so the lamb would be given to a family that they would take home and take care of for the week before Passover. And during this time, they would feed it, take care of it, live with it, treat it as one of their own, keep it safe. And then, on the day of Passover, they would take it to the church and put the unblemished lamb on the altar as an offering to God. They would put its neck on the altar and take a blade and cut the knife of the lamb. Now they did this as a sacrifice, and the blood would go into these little bowls as just offerings and whatnot. This is what happened back in the day when it came to the Jewish faith. Now, when Jesus died on the cross, he was the Lamb of God, the unblemished lamb, the innocent lamb. God himself said, this, I am going to be the sacrifice of the Mass. I am going to be the sacrifice, the one who willingly gives myself up as a sacrifice so that they will never have to give again anymore. They will not have to give to me to prove anything. There's no proving here as Catholics and at the Mass. And so when we come to Mass, that is what happens. During the Mass, Jesus is on the cross, dies, and is resurrected at every Mass. He touches base here on earth. So whenever Mass happens, God invades the space of the Mass. That is why it's important, not because of the music, not because of the speakers, not because of who is here, but because God is here. And every single day he touches down here. Heaven and earth collide, which is why we treat the Mass and the church with the reverence that it deserves. Some of the most beautiful art and music of all time was written for the Mass. Some of the most beautiful buildings of all time were church buildings, cathedrals. Why? Not because of some just making this beautiful place that you can look at, but to mark the places where Jesus is touching down here on earth. That is the weight behind the Mass. That is what we've been missing. That is what we forget. So many people out there have grasped this already. And they're willing to do anything, willing to die, willing to be arrested, willing to be put in harm's way because they recognize that if Jesus is going to be there and I believe that he is God, not a symbol, then I am going to be there. I don't say this to guilt you into going to Mass. Because you haven't been in a while, that doesn't mean that you were this bad person. Those criticisms and those frustrations you have with Mass are very real that you feel. I feel the same way. I get frustrated when people are talking in Mass. I get frustrated when people aren't speaking, aren't proclaiming, aren't leading in the Mass to what they should be. Because if you look at the Mass, the only problems of it are when you and I and the people watching and participating when we do it half-heartedly. If the weakest part of the Mass is us, then we need to change something. Because the same God that's here is the same God that's present at the best church you've ever been to, the same God that's present at any retreat that you went to, at any conference that you went to. The same God that was all the way in the Bible is the one that's still here. And so if there's going to be ever any change, if you're going to ever come to Mass and get anything out of it, it's because God will give it to you. Because he is worth it and he inspires it. I'm not saying this to guilt you. I'm saying this to hopefully help you recognize that this is something that we all need. Not something that should impress us. Not something that should make us go, whoa, how cool, how inspiring, how fun. But something we go to because we say, I want to be where Jesus is. I want to be where he touches base. I want to be in the house the moment he takes the steps here on earth. And again, this is something that we all need to recognize. And so the next time you are at Mass, you are watching Mass, you were outdoors, you were inside the church or the hall, wherever, know that however it's packaged, in whatever form it takes, it is still God. And he is still making himself known here. Let's think about that the next time we go to Mass. And if we all buy into that, then I guarantee you that we could change the tide of not only how our Masses are, but of the entire church, the entire county and state and world. I look forward to seeing you at Mass.